OG Rose, and today we're going to be talking about section 23 of Belonging again, and I'm going to be reading a lot of this section. We have been discussing Peter Berger, Philip Reef, Dr. Hunter, Conyers, and other thinkers, and I really think these individuals were very far ahead of their time, understanding how the society played the role of giving us existential stability, not merely economic benefits. I think we stressed for a very long time the economic role of society and de-emphasized the role of society providing a feeling of belonging and home, without which people feel atomized. People feel like they can't fit into anything, and that can lead into cultural backlashes or atomizations that have a lot of unintended consequences. Admittedly, themes of crisis, malaise, and decline have been so widely promulgated that one wonders whether this conviction is not also a conceit, for nearly every generation of intellectuals since that time has made the claim that its generation is the decisive one. In one sense, it is irrelevant whether the various claims have any basis in reality. Merely the fact that they are made repeatedly and with such passion is significant. It's always tempting to feel like our generation is different from previous generations, that our age is the final, that it's the end. It's hard to imagine the world going on after we die. So I think it can be tempting to think of every generation as the last generation, and that will always be our generation. By definition, must be the most future generation. And so it's easy to think of it as the last. But all civilizations have dealt with this tension of the social order and making individuals feel like it fits, and there have been plenty of examples where people have felt like they didn't fit, and as a result there has been revolution, upheaval, and violence. Really, we can go through religious wars, civil wars, and so on and so forth. However, we can examine modernity and pluralism as maybe being unique in that in the past, say, if you didn't feel like you religiously belonged, you could get on a boat and go to North America. Before it was called North America, you could leave, you could find different places. But there's a radical interconnectedness today because of the internet and the lack of new geographical frontiers on Earth. Maybe one day in Mars it will be different. Maybe in the future with spaceships, people will leave for other planets to practice their religion freely. And practicing religion freely is also linked together with seeking existential stability. But I do think it is at least fair to say that there are no longer available the same ways of dealing with the problem of existential instability, which is the meaning crisis, the problem of meaning, as discussed in The Meaning Crisis as a Sign of Hope, and other works by O.G. Rose. There is something unique about modernity and pluralism in that the old ways of escaping existential instability are not so readily available, and that may increase the likelihood of a turn to to totalitarianism, authoritarianism, and things like that. Precisely in being what they are, modernity and pluralism fail to provide a stable universe of meaning from which people root their personal identity and significance. This isn't primarily because they declare nihilism is true, but because all givens lose their robustness and are deprived of plausibility, meaning plausibility structures weaken, as will be discussed. Pluralism substantially undermines the credibility of traditional routines and patterns of social life, previously experienced as objective facticity. In other words, pluralism has a built-in destabilizing tendency, which has consequences for all dimensions of human life. Consequently, traditional definitions of reality, which had previously provided stable coordinates for living everyday life in courtship, marriage, child-rearing, religious faith and practice, interpersonal exchange, and the like, are increasingly fluid, fragmented, and deprived of plausibility. The net effect is profound crisis of meaning and certainty for the modern individual, in which self-identity is perhaps the central problem. As evident by both Brexit and Trump, and in line with both Reef's and Berger's thinking, the disconnects of modernity can generate cultural backlash in the form of political and social protest movements. And the more serious problematic about modernity's discontents is that they foster a vulnerability to totalitarianism, a political solution to the social, psychological yearning for home. In Berger's view, human beings require reliable interpretations of reality and personal experience. When subjective reality fails to fit with social reality, and where society fails to supply givens, the question for meaning turns inward to the depths of human subjectivity. To put it another way, since the assumptions of everyday life are no longer taken for granted, in practical terms, modern man is faced with an extraordinary number of choices. Without an objective social order to turn to, modern man turns inward to his subjectivity for those answers. The problem with subjectivization is plain at this point. Who one really is, how one should live. These reality definitions are subjectively real only insofar as they are continually reaffirmed by others. If everyone has turned inward to their subjectivities, people are not there, per se, to provide affirmation and plausibility to the subjectivities of those around them. Hence, everyone's subjectivities fail to provide robustness and givenness to them, leading to existential anxiety and longings for home. Deinstitutionalization and subjectification are then the complementary problems of modern society. Meanings are not experienced simply as legitimizations of objective power interests. Rather, objective structures are important as they give plausibility to meanings that are a fundamental need of everyday life. These objective structures also provide plausibility structures and are possible thanks to what Berger called mediating structures, as will be discussed. The entities in a society that make people feel like what they believe is that which they are justified to believe in, to the point where those beliefs are given. Dialectically, Berger argued that objective structures provide plausibility structures for subjective meanings at the same time that meanings provide legitimizations for objective social structures. Without plausibility structures, there cannot be givens, which will result in mass subjectification, the only ostensible source left of legitimization for the individual. In this state, Berger feared there are strong pressures for authoritarian, counter-modernizing ideologies of right or left, which are typically totalitarian. Strangely, this is the givenless state of extreme freedom, which Erich Fromm writes about, a state which tends to become its authoritarian opposite, leading to a relativism which is psychologically unbearable because of the human need for meaning. Paradoxically, as Reef warned, a world in which everything is a matter of choice isn't a state of liberation, but a state of chaos. And where there is chaos, there is desire and impulse for an authoritarianism that orders and organizes it. Dostoevsky's Grand Inquisitor, tragically, was right. Turned inward and too free, Berger believed moderns are especially prone to revolutionary tendencies to restore order and to make their subjective realities fit again with social reality, to the point where moderns establish their subjectivities as given, regardless of the fact or unaware that, as Wittgenstein said, reviving a tradition is like trying to repair a spider's web with your bare hands. The logic applies to plausibility structures, givens, and the like. If the traditionalist revolutionists fail, perhaps the consequences will be similar to what Burke predicted about the French Revolution. For more by O.G. Rose, please visit ogrose.com for all the sections of belonging. Again, please check Medium. There's a list there listing them out. And thank you for your time.